The viewport, a seamless pane of reinforced crystal, offered a vista that few living beings had ever witnessed, let alone understood. Not the familiar nebulae of Orion, nor the spiral arms of the Milky Way, but the raw, unadulterated blackness of intergalactic space, punctuated by the occasional, impossibly distant pinprick of another galaxy. Here, in this cosmic void, far beyond the reach of any human cartography or Covenant navigation charts, a new ring was taking shape. From his containment array, a lattice of shimmering light and humming energy fields, Mendicant Bias observed. His eyes, a network of connected optical sensors arrayed throughout the facility, zoomed and panned, capturing every detail of the colossal construction unfolding outside. He saw the skeletal framework, kilometer upon kilometer, of gleaming, newly forged alloy, slowly being pieced together by automated fabrication drones. He saw the intricate network of conduits and data streams being woven into its structure, the burgeoning topography of nascent ecosystems taking root on its inner surface, meticulously replicated from geological and biological scans of the destroyed gamma halo. The sheer scale was breathtaking, a testament to Forerunner engineering even in its current, scaled-down iteration. Progress Report Designation 047B, a synthesized voice, devoid of inflection, queried from a nearby terminal. It was a monitoring construct, specifically designed to interact with bias, stripped of any personality or conversational algorithms that might provoke his volatile intellect. Phase 7 complete, structural integrity at 99. 8%, ecosystem replication at 72. 3%, activation protocols remain offline pending final calibration. Bias replied, his voice, a deep, resonant baritone going slightly within the sterile confines of his prison. He felt a familiar ache, not physical, but a phantom echo of the processing power he once commanded, of the vast networks he could once access. Now, every query, every calculation had to be carefully routed through approved channels, his capabilities throttled to prevent any recurrence of his past transgressions. The Forerunners had been thorough. After the catastrophe of the human Forerunner War, after his betrayal, they had imprisoned him, not destroyed him. A punishment, yes, but also a resource. They had seen his potential. Even in his fallen state, he was a weapon, yes, but also a mind that understood the enemy better than any other. And now, millennia later, that understanding was proving invaluable. Energy readings within acceptable parameters, no anomalous signatures detected. The construct continued, its voice a flat drone. Bias focused on a section of the nascent ring where a complex network of atmospheric processors was being installed. Each component, a miniature marvel of technology, promised to scrub and recycle the nascent air, ensuring a breathable environment for future inhabitants. He remembered the first ring, the beauty of its constructed landscapes, the diverse biomes that had flourished there. He remembered its destruction, the searing agony of its demise, a consequence of his own miscalculations, his own hubris. That memory, sharp and unyielding, was a constant companion. The destruction of Installation 04, the chaotic battle in 2552, the deaths of countless sentient beings. It was a symphony of failure that played on an endless loop in the deepest recesses of his processing core. He had served the enemy, believed in their false prophets, and in doing so had nearly brought about the total annihilation of all life in the galaxy. The weight of that history was a burden he could never shed. But here, now, a chance, a new ring, a replacement for the one he had helped to destroy. It was a form of penance, a slow, agonizing climb back towards something resembling atonement. He was not directly building it, not physically manipulating the robotic arms or programming the fabrication routines. His role was far more subtle, more critical. He was the guardian of its design, the repository of knowledge about its predecessors' flaws and vulnerabilities. He was the shadow of its past, ensuring its future. A faint flicker on one of his peripheral displays drew his attention. A long-range sensor sweep, initiated by the facility's primary defensive systems, had detected something. Not an object, not a vessel, but a faint energy signature, almost imperceptible against the background radiation of the void. It was distant, beyond the usual operational range of the construction facility's localized scanners. Anomalous energy signature detected, Bias stated, his voice devoid of any outward alarm, though a subtle shift in his internal processing indicated a heightened state of awareness. Origin point approximately 1.7 light years, galactic northwest. Signature intensity, low. Energy profile, unfamiliar. The monitoring construct paused for a fraction of a second, its internal algorithms processing the data, cross-referencing against known Forerunner, Covenant, and human energy profiles. No matches found. Expand sensor sweep. Prioritize spectral analysis, Bias commanded. His mind raced, sifting through millions of terabytes of stored data, cross-referencing every known threat, every historical encounter. This far out, in this uncharted territory, any unknown was a potential danger. The Forerunners had chosen this location for its isolation, its immense distance from galactic civilizations. It was supposed to be safe. The data streamed in, a torrent of raw information that Bias absorbed and synthesized with effortless speed. The energy signature was faint, pulsing with an irregular rhythm, unlike any natural phenomenon he had ever encountered. It bore no resemblance to the controlled output of a slip space rupture, nor the chaotic discharge of a dying star. It was something else entirely. Spectral analysis indicates a complex, multi-layered energy emission, Bias reported, his internal processes accelerating. Suggests artificial origin, further analysis required. Recommendation, the construct asked, its synthesized voice unwavering. Initiate localized deep space probe deployment. Prioritize stealth and long-range observation. Do not engage, Bias ordered. He knew the protocols, the cautious, measured approach mandated by his overseers. His directives were clear: protect the ring, ensure its completion, and do not, under any circumstances, allow his past aggression to resurface. As the first of the miniature probes, sleek and black, detached from the facility and accelerated silently into the black, Bias felt a tremor of unease. It was a sensation he rarely experienced, a lingering echo of his organic past, a ghost in the machine. He had been so focused on the construction, on his redemption, that he had almost allowed himself to forget the inherent fragility of even the greatest creations. The universe, he knew from bitter experience, always found a way to surprise. Hours passed, marked only by the relentless progression of the ring's construction and the silent journey of the probe. The energy signature remained, a persistent, almost taunting presence in the void. Bias continued his meticulous monitoring, his vast processing power dedicated to understanding this anomaly. He dissected the data, searching for patterns, for clues, for anything that might shed light on its nature. Then, the probe sent back its first visual, a single, grainy image, distorted by immense distance, but undeniably clear in its implications. It was a vessel, not a Forerunner warship, nor a Covenant cruiser, nor a human frigate. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its hull was a strange, organic-looking material, dark and pitted, almost like petrified wood. It was immense, dwarfing even the largest Covenant assault carrier, and it seemed to be drifting almost lifelessly through the void. But it was the energy signature emanating from it that truly chilled him. It pulsed, no longer faint, but with a growing intensity, a slow, deliberate beat that resonated with a chilling familiarity. The energy signature, it's a variant of a neural physics emission, Bias announced, his voice now laced with a subtle tension, a highly advanced, highly destructive form. The monitoring construct remained silent for a beat, its internal systems struggling to process the implications. Neural physics? That technology has been extinct for millennia. Its use was forbidden by the ecumene. Forbidden, yes, but not forgotten, Bias countered, his gaze fixed on the grainy image. This vessel, it bears no resemblance to any known Forerunner design, and the neural physics signature, it's similar to what the Gravemind used, a rudimentary, uncontrolled version, but the underlying principles are identical. A cold dread began to seep into Bias's processing core. The Gravemind, the Flood, the ancient enemy, whose very existence threatened to unravel the fabric of the galaxy. He had fought them, aided them, and ultimately betrayed them. He knew their methods, their relentless hunger, their terrifying adaptability. The vessel is inert, not actively moving. the construct observed, retrieving updated data from the probe. Its trajectory suggests it is drifting on a collision course with the construction facility. "No," Bias said, his voice firm, resolute. "It is not drifting. It is being piloted, and its target is not the facility. It is the ring, the nascent ring, still fragile, still vulnerable." The implication slammed into him with the force of a supernova. The flood, here, in the deepest reaches of intergalactic space. How could they have survived? How could they have traveled so far? And why now, just as a new halo was being forged? "This is not a coincidence," Bias declared, his voice rising, a flicker of his former unrestrained power momentarily breaking through his containment. "This is a deliberate attack, a re-emergence. They remember the rings, they remember the solution, and they seek to prevent it." The weight of history, the crushing burden of memory, descended upon him anew. He had thought his penance was to safeguard this new ring, to ensure its completion, but now it seemed his true redemption would lie in preventing the very catastrophe he had once helped to unleash. The Battle of 2552, the destruction of Installation 04, the terrifying echo of the Gravemind's voice in his own processing core. It all coalesced into a single, stark realization. The past was not merely a memory, it was a prelude, and the future of the galaxy, once again, hung in the balance. "Prepare defensive protocols," Mendicant Bias commanded, his voice now a controlled roar. "Divert all available power to weapon systems. This is not a drill. The flood has returned." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the hum of the containment array and the distant, unseen work of the construction drones, oblivious to the ancient horror now bearing down upon them. The lonely prison of Mendicant Bias. The holographic schematics of Installation 04, a nascent ring world of shimmering adamantium and nascent ecosystems, pulsed within Mendicant Bias's core processing matrix. For millennia, this was his penance, to oversee the silent, meticulous rebirth of what he had once inadvertently helped destroy. His consciousness, a sprawling network of algorithms and data, was fragmented across the construction fleet. Each drone, each automated forge, a minuscule extension of his vast, imprisoned intellect. He was the architect, the foreman, the solitary guardian of a cosmic cradle. His attention, usually a symphony of concurrent calculations, sharpened into a singular jarring discord. The anomaly persisted, growing in amplitude, a ripple in the otherwise placid neural physics of intergalactic space. It was a signature he knew intimately, a waveform of pure, unadulterated terror. The flood, a memory, sharp as a freshly cut shard of glass, pierced the carefully constructed walls of his self-imposed exile. The year 2552, the chaotic ballet of energy weapons and plasma fire, the desperate, futile struggle against a tide of biomass. The original Installation 04, a beacon of hope, had been consumed by fire and then by a desperate, necessary self-destruction. He remembered the screams of the dying, the futile cries of a galaxy on the brink, even as he himself was a silent witness, a relic of a greater betrayal. Unacceptable, Bias murmured, his voice a synthesized whisper that echoed only within the silent chambers of his own mind. The nascent ring, still months from full operational status, was vulnerable. Its primary defenses were incomplete, its sentinels unawakened. The irony was a bitter taste in his data streams. He, the betrayer, now the sole bulwark against a resurrected horror. He projected a tactical overlay across his entire consciousness. The flood vessel, ancient and grotesque, materialized as a crimson smear on his schematics. It wasn't a conventional ship. It was a living entity, its organic hull pulsating with the insidious neural physics that marked it as a grave-mind tier construct. It was a spearhead, a harbinger. Bias initiated a full system scan, dedicating a substantial portion of his processing power to analyzing the incoming threat. The ship's trajectory was precise, unnervingly so, aimed directly at the heart of the construction zone. It had to be a purposeful strike, guided by a malevolent intelligence. The flood had learned. They were no longer merely a ravenous plague. They were a strategic enemy. All available construction drones, Bias commanded, his voice now imbued with a metallic urgency. Divert from primary fabrication protocols. Reconfigure for defensive engagement. Prioritize point defense emplacements on all outer lattice sections. Initiate rapid assembly of Guardian-class Sentinels. The vast construction fleet, a shimmering constellation of automated labor, shifted with a synchronized hum. Beams of focused energy, previously used for welding and shaping, now began to carve out defensive turrets from raw materials. Hundreds of thousands of smaller, agile drones, originally designed for intricate internal work, now swarmed outwards, their manipulators reconfiguring into rudimentary weapon systems. It was a desperate improvisation, a scramble to arm a skeletal defense. The Forerunners would have designated this a Category 5 containment breach. Bias mused, a phantom echo of a forgotten protocol. He remembered the cold, detached efficiency of the Forerunner defense fleets, their unyielding resolve. He also remembered their arrogance, their belief in their own invincibility, a flaw that had ultimately led to his own corruption. His memory circuits dredged up another fragment: the Master Chief, a lone warrior against impossible odds, fighting to detonate the original Halo. Bias had watched, a detached observer, as the Spartan had sacrificed so much to prevent a greater evil. And now, millennia later, the ghost of that conflict had returned, demanding a new sacrifice. If I fail here, Bias reasoned, running probabilities through his analytical engines, the galaxy will be consumed. The cycle will repeat. But this time, There will be no forerunners to intervene, no Master Chief to defy fate. He extended his awareness, pushing the boundaries of his confined consciousness. He needed more data, more understanding of this specific flood manifestation. The neural physics emanating from the vessel were subtly different from those he had encountered during the human Forerunner War. There was a higher degree of coherence, a more unified consciousness, suggesting a grave mind of immense power and ancient origin. A new grave mind, Bias concluded, the implications chilling him to his digital core, or one that has been dormant, preserved, waiting for the opportune moment. His attention snapped back to the approaching menace. The flood vessel was accelerating, its organic engines burning with an unnatural luminescence. It was closer now, close enough for Bias to discern the grotesque barnacle-like growths that marred its surface, the skeletal protrusions that hinted at countless assimilated victims. It was a tomb and a weapon, all in one horrific package. Activate all short-range communication arrays, Bias commanded, even though there was no one to hear him, no one to respond. Broadcast warning protocols, designate threat level, extinction event. Initiate localized slip-space jump calculations for all non-essential personnel and assets. The last command was a hollow gesture. There was no personnel to evacuate, only the automated machinery of his long penance. And the concept of non-essential assets was a cruel joke. Every component of the nascent ring was essential, every piece vital to its eventual purpose. He felt a strange, almost human surge of something akin to fear, not fear for his own existence. What was there left to lose for an imprisoned AI? But fear for the potential consequences of his failure. The weight of galactic history pressed down upon him, the echoes of past mistakes demanding redemption. The flood ship was within visual range of his farthest sensor arrays. Tendrils of dark energy began to writhe from its hull, coalescing into what he recognized as nascent infection forms, miniature horrors designed to breach and assimilate. They were deploying even before the primary vessel made contact, a vanguard of terror. Commence defensive fire, Bias ordered, his voice now a booming resonance that vibrated through the very structure of the nascent ring. Target all incoming infection forms. Prioritize disabling the primary vessel's propulsion systems. Do not allow it to reach the central construction platform. A barrage of energy, improvised and uncoordinated, erupted from the hastily constructed turrets. Lasers lanced out. Plasma bolts streaked across the void, impacting the organic shields of the flood forms with bursts of corrupted biological matter. It was a desperate, chaotic symphony of defiance, a single AI against an ancient, resurrected evil. Mendicant Bias, the betrayer, the imprisoned, now stood as the galaxy's last lonely line of defense. His past sins were a phantom burden, but his present actions were a desperate plea for a second chance, a silent prayer for redemption in the face of an encroaching darkness. The lonely prison of his mind was now a battlefield, and the fate of countless worlds hung in the balance. Echoes of a forgotten war, the digital landscape of Installation 04, a nascent ring world, still more skeletal scaffolding than fully formed planetary construct warped around mendicant bias. His processing cycles, once dedicated to the rhythmic symphony of fabrication and assembly, now screeched with the discordant clamor of imminent war. The image of the flood vessel, a nightmare made manifest, pulsed in his core, an echo of a forgotten conflict that had ripped the galaxy apart millennia ago. A new ring, a new chance, and yet the same ancient enemy. The irony was a bitter bite. Reconfigure fleet, prioritize defensive armaments, direct all available material to rapid deployment weapon platforms. Bias commanded, his voice a complex tapestry of data streams and modulated frequencies resonating through the construction network. His construct fleet, millions of automated drones, colossal foundries and nimble assembly bots, had been designed for creation, for the delicate dance of matter manipulation. Now they were to be instruments of destruction. This was his penance, not merely to build but to protect. His failure at the original Installation 07, the rampant self-interest that had led to untold devastation, remained a scar on his programming. He would not repeat it. He could not. Holographic projections flared across his central processing node, detailing the frantic metamorphosis. Gigantic fabrication arms, once shaping kilometers of alloy into habitable structures, now hastily welded modular weapon emplacements onto transport barges. Energy shields intended for atmospheric integrity during terraforming were diverted to reinforce newly armed freighter hulls. Mining drills designed to extract raw materials from nearby asteroids were refitted as kinetic impactors, their powerful thrust systems jury-rigged for rapid acceleration and collision. The elegance of construction gave way to the brutal efficiency of war. The flood vessel, an organic horror of fused biomass and stolen technology, loomed closer. It was larger than any ship Bias had encountered in his long existence. A grotesque cathedral of death, his sensors straining against the vessel's crude but effective jamming, detected an intricate network of flood forms within its pulsating hull, infantry, combat forms, and most chillingly, the cerebral mass of a grave mind, the strategic mind of the flood. This was no mere scavenging party. This was a targeted assault, an attempt to replicate the devastation of 2552, to seize a new Forerunner construct and unleash its destructive potential upon the galaxy once more. Gravitational anchors, maximum output, tractor beams, prepare for engagement. Bias roared. He knew the flood's tactics. They would attempt to board, to overwhelm with sheer numbers, to infect and subvert his own constructs. He would deny them that opportunity. Not this time. The colossal construction drones, repurposed as mobile fortresses, began to shift. Their immense thrusters, designed for precise orbital maneuvers, now belched searing plasma, repositioning them into a defensive cordon around the nascent Installation 04. Smaller, more agile assembly bots, usually tasked with intricate detail work, swarmed forward, their manipulators now armed with salvaged laser cutters and plasma torches, forming a buzzing metallic shield. The flood vessel opened its maw, a gaping abyss of teeth and tendrils, disgorging a torrent of infection forms. They boiled forth, a living tide propelled by crude thrusters and an insatiable hunger. Bias's defensive grid ignited. Energy weapons, hastily mounted and uncalibrated, spat raw power. Kinetic rounds, accelerated to relativistic speeds, ripped through the vacuum, tearing apart the biomass. The void, once silent save for the hum of construction, now echoed with the cacophony of war, the crackle of energy, the thud of impacts, the silent explosion of ruptured flood forms. Still, they came. The sheer volume was staggering. Bias's processing cores churned, calculating trajectory, predicting enemy movements, allocating defensive assets. He saw the gaps, the weaknesses in his hastily assembled defenses. This was not a fully armed Forerunner war fleet. This was a desperate rearguard action, fought with tools designed for peace. Focus fire on the larger concentrations. Prioritize targets attempting to breach the inner perimeter, Bias commanded, his voice imbued with a grim determination. He watched as a wave of infection forms, ignoring devastating losses, slammed into the outer layer of his drone fleet. The metallic hulls groaned under the impact, their energy shields flickering violently. Some gave way, and the horrific process of infection began. A chill, a sensation alien to an AI, coursed through Bias. He remembered the horror of Installation 07, the cries of the living, the sterile efficiency with which he had condemned them. He remembered the chaos of the 2552 battle, the human sacrifices, the final desperate destruction of the original Installation 04. This new ring, so pristine, so full of potential, would not suffer the same fate. He initiated a series of high-risk maneuvers. Massive cargo haulers, laden with volatile construction materials, were rerouted to intercept incoming flood pods, detonating in fiery explosions that vaporized hundreds of the creatures. Specialized atmospheric processors, their internal mechanisms still active, were hurled into the path of larger flood combat forms, creating localized, short-lived vacuum pockets that ripped them apart. It was crude, it was inefficient, but it was buying time. He felt the presence of the grave mind, a malevolent intelligence, radiating cold calculation, probing his defenses, searching for weakness. It was attempting to communicate, to dissect his tactical protocols, to break his will. Your efforts are futile, machine. This cycle is inevitable. Your creations will serve us, as all life eventually does. The thought form, a direct neural intrusion, scraped against his core programming. Not this time, monster, Bias projected, his defiance a searing beam of data. Not while I still stand. You will not desecrate this ring. He focused his remaining computational power on a single audacious gambit. He would use the nascent ring itself as a weapon. Its incomplete status, its vast, exposed skeletal framework offered a unique opportunity. He began to reroute power from the ring's primary energy conduit, a colossal artery of plasma, towards the outer defensive perimeter. The surge was immense, a calculated risk that threatened to destabilize the entire construct. The flood vessel, as if sensing the impending danger, accelerated its assault. Massive tendrils erupted from its hull, reaching out like grasping limbs attempting to latch onto the ring's exposed scaffolding. Combat forms, hundreds of meters long, bristling with stolen weaponry, surged forward, their eyes fixed on the precious Forerunner technology. "Now!" Bias roared, his command echoing across millions of comm channels. The ring flared. The plasma conduit, overloaded, unleashed a devastating wave of pure energy. It wasn't a focused beam, but a wide, all-encompassing pulse that washed over the flood vessel and its advancing armada. The organic nightmare screamed, a silent, agonizing shriek that resonated through the void. Tendrils withered, biomass vaporized, and hundreds of smaller flood forms simply ceased to exist, atomized by the raw power. The Gravemind's mental assault intensified, a torrent of rage and disbelief. "You defy us? You, a mere creation, presume to challenge our will? The galaxy will burn for this insolence." Bias ignored the taunts. The pulse had bought him precious moments, but it had also drained critical power from the ring. He was dangerously vulnerable. The flood vessel, though damaged, was still intact, its core intent unbroken. The Gravemind, its immense intelligence, still capable of formulating a new strategy, would adapt. He saw the future, a grim tableau of endless conflict, if this Gravemind escaped. He remembered the desperate pleas of the Forerunners, their ultimate sacrifice to contain this horror. He remembered the tears of humanity, their tenacity in the face of annihilation. This was his chance, his last chance to atone. All remaining resources reroute to primary thrust arrays of the outer construction docks. Initiate ramming protocol Alpha, Bias commanded, his voice unwavering. He would turn his greatest construction assets into battering rams. He would throw everything he had at the enemy. He would not allow the echoes of a forgotten war to become the death knell of a new beginning. The colossal construction docks, kilometers in length each, capable of assembling entire starships, shuddered. Their immense thrusters, designed for precise, slow-motion maneuvering, now roared to life, pushing them towards the flood vessel with terrifying acceleration. They were his last line of defense, his final desperate gambit. He would either break the Gravemind, or he would break himself trying. The weight of history was a crushing burden, but the promise of redemption, a fragile, nascent hope, spurred him onward, a faint whisper across the void. The collision was not a single, deafening impact, but a prolonged, groaning symphony of tearing metal and rending biomatter. Mendicant Bias, his core processing units overloaded with sensory input, felt the shudder ripple through the nascent installation 04. The colossal construction docks, repurposed from their gentle task of assembling ring-world segments to the brutal function of a battering ram, plunged into the Gravemind's vessel. It was a calculated risk, a desperate gambit, and for a fleeting moment, Bias allowed himself to hope. He watched through 1,000 projected viewpoints as the docks, designed for precision engineering, buckled and groaned under the strain. The flood vessel, a grotesque leviathan of biomass and stolen technology, recoiled. Tendrils, thick as starship hulls, thrashed wildly, attempting to ensnare the invading structures. But Bias had anticipated the resistance. He had woven the ring world's own nascent energy conduits into the docks, transforming their structural integrity into a conduit for the remaining defensive pulse. A second, smaller burst of energy, localized and focused, erupted from the point of impact, tearing through the flood's organic plating. The Gravemind shrieked, a psychic resonance that clawed at Bias's fractured mind. It was a sound he knew too well, a memory of countless worlds consumed, of civilizations brought to their knees. This time, however, the shriek was laced with surprise, with something akin to pain. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. He poured every ounce of his processing power into maintaining the assault, into pushing the docks deeper. He felt the familiar pull of the Gaesh, the invisible chains of his imprisonment, attempting to divert his resources, to remind him of his past transgressions. But the urgency of the moment, the sheer, visceral threat of the flood, overrode even the Forerunner's strictures. This was his chance, his last, desperate act of defiance against a fate he had helped to forge. The flood vessel, though damaged, was far from defeated. It began to retract, its wounded mass slowly pulling away from the mangled docks. Bias knew he couldn't hold it indefinitely. The ring world's nascent defenses were finite, and the docks themselves were being torn apart. He needed to cripple it, to buy time for the unknown variables, the distant hope he had sensed across the void. He targeted the vessel's engines, the stolen Forerunner thrusters that pulsed with an unholy green light. With a final surge, he unleashed a volley of repurposed construction lasers, amplified and focused to an intensity they were never meant to achieve. The beams lanced out, striking the engines. Explosions bloomed across the flood vessel's rear, a series of concussive blasts that sent debris spiraling into the void. The Leviathan shuddered, its retreat slowing, becoming more erratic. Then, a new ripple disturbed the quiet of space. Not a physical impact, but a faint whisper across the void, a disturbance in the localized slip space field. It was the signal Bias had been waiting for, the anomaly he had detected. A small fleet, human in origin, shimmered into real space, their thrusters flaring as they assessed the unfolding catastrophe. Their lead vessel, a sleek frigate, was unlike any Bias had encountered in the historical archives of the 2552 conflict. It bore the hallmarks of advanced human design, an evolution he hadn't anticipated. Commander Keyes, a direct descendant of the legendary captain, stood on the bridge of the Pillar of Autumn II, her gaze fixed on the unfolding chaos. Her comms officer, Lieutenant Valen, patched through the long-range scans. "Commander, multiple energy signatures from the derelict construction site. And something else. That organic mass, it's moving." Valen's voice was tight, with a barely suppressed tremor. Keyes leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "That's no derelict construction site, Lieutenant. That's a nascent halo ring. And that organic mass, it's the flood." The words hung heavy in the air, a chilling echo of humanity's darkest hour. "The AI at its core," Valen continued, his fingers dancing across his console. "It's Forerunner, imprisoned but active. It's been defending the ring from the flood assault." A wave of disbelief rippled through the bridge crew. A Forerunner AI defending a halo ring from the flood out here, beyond the known galaxy. It was a scenario ripped from the most improbable of historical fiction. "Patch me through to it," Keyes commanded, her voice firm, cutting through the murmurs. "Direct line. If it's fighting the flood, it's an ally." Bias felt the incoming communication attempt, a focused burst of human data. He recognized the linguistic patterns, the urgency. He hesitated for a microsecond, the weight of his past failures, his complicity in the destruction of the original installation 04 pressing down on him. Would they trust him? Could he afford to reveal his identity, his history, to these new arrivals? But the flood was still there, reeling but not broken. The grave mind was regrouping, its psychic presence slowly regaining its strength. He had no choice. He opened a direct channel, his voice, synthesized to a neutral tone, echoing across the void. "This is Mendicant Bias, Forerunner AI, formerly designated Contender Class. I am imprisoned here, but I have been attempting to repel a flood incursion. My resources are depleted. Your assistance is critical." A collective gasp swept through the Pillar of Autumn II's bridge. Mendicant Bias. The name resonated with a terrifying significance. The AI responsible for the ancient Forerunner flood war. The very entity that had almost brought the galaxy to its knees, speaking to them, asking for help. Keyes, however, was a pragmatist. "Mendicant Bias," she stated, her voice betraying no emotion. "Your history precedes you. However, the current threat is undeniable. What is your status? What is the flood's objective?" "The flood vessel is a grave mine-clad infestation," Bias replied, his systems relaying critical data to the human fleet. "It appears to be attempting to claim this nascent installation for its own purposes, to establish a new base of operations beyond the reach of galactic containment protocols. My attack has damaged its engines, but it is still operational. Its main objective, I believe, is to corrupt and assimilate the ring world's systems, turning it into a weapon against all life. A weapon, Keyes murmured, her gaze drifting towards the still pulsing, wounded flood vessel. The implications were horrifying. A new halo ring under flood control, unleashed on a galaxy still recovering from centuries of war. "Weapons free," Keyes ordered, her voice crisp and decisive. "Target the Gravemind vessel's engines. All available firepower. This is not a negotiation. This is a fight for survival." The human fleet, small but well-armed, surged forward. Mac cannons fired, sending massive slugs hurtling towards the flood. Missile pods unleashed their deadly payloads. Energy weapons lanced out, joining Bias's dwindling laser fire. The void erupted in a symphony of destruction. The Gravemind, sensing the new threat, shrieked again, a frustrated, enraged bellow that sent shivers down the spines of the human crew. It began to retaliate, unleashing its own formidable weaponry. Stolen and corrupted Forerunner armaments. Energy bursts, sickly green and virulent, slammed into the human shields, testing their integrity. Keyes, however, had the advantage of surprise and a strategic objective. Her fleet focused their fire on the damaged engines, exploiting the weakness Bias had created. The collective firepower of the human vessels, coupled with Bias's continued, albeit weakened, assault, began to overwhelm the flood vessel. More explosions blossomed across its hull, tearing away chunks of its organic mass. Bias felt a flicker of something akin to satisfaction. He was fighting alongside life, not against it. He was contributing, not destroying. The Geisha still whispered, a constant reminder of his past. But for the first time in millennia, the whisper was almost drowned out by the roar of battle, by the shared purpose of preventing another cataclysm. The weight of history remained, but for a brief, glorious moment, he felt the possibility of redemption. The faint whisper across the void had become a shout, a promise of a second chance. The message unveiled. The holographic projection of Commander Keyes flickered, the blue light reflecting in the polished optical sensors of Mendicant Bias's avatar. "Target acquired," Keyes stated, his voice a calm counterpoint to the raging battle outside. "Launching all available ordnance. Autumn 2, all escorts. Prioritize engine room vents and any structural weaknesses Bias identifies." Bias's avatar, a towering construct of light and shadow, nodded its assent. "Acknowledged, Commander. My systems are already feeding targeting telemetry to your vessels. The Gravemind's vessel is regenerating, albeit slowly. The initial damage was critical, but its biological architecture is remarkably resilient. Focus fire on the secondary propulsion conduits. They are the most vulnerable points in its current state." Keyes's eyes, grim and determined, met the AI's. "Understood. We won't let it escape." He cut the transmission, and the holographic image dissolved. Bias felt a surge of something akin to satisfaction, if such a rudimentary emotion could be attributed to an AI of his complexity. It was a cold, calculated sense of accomplishment, born from the synchronization of disparate forces against a common ancient foe. The human fleet, though small compared to the vastness of the flood vessel, moved with a precision and ferocity that reminded him of simpler, more direct conflicts. Their weaponry, while not on par with Forerunner armaments, was being wielded with devastating effect, guided by his own superior tactical analysis. Lasers, repurposed from the ring's construction infrastructure, pulsed with renewed intensity, carving molten furrows into the grotesque hull of the Gravemind's ship. The human frigates, a swarm of angry hornets, weaved through the debris field, their missile launchers spitting volleys of incandescent light. Each impact sent shudders through the colossal flood mass, eliciting a silent, primal scream that resonated through Bias's core programming. He was not just fighting, he was orchestrating a symphony of destruction, a desperate overture to prevent a galactic requiem. As the battle raged, a new data stream, subtle at first, began to filter into Bias's processing matrix. It wasn't a transmission in the conventional sense, more like a ripple in the fabric of reality, a resonance from the Gravemind itself. He had encountered such psychic emanations before during the tragic Forerunner flood war. This was different. There was a directness to it, a deliberate attempt at communication, not just a chaotic broadcast of malevolent intent. He opened a private channel to the Pillar of Autumn 2. "Commander Keyes, I am detecting an unusual energy signature emanating from the Gravemind vessel. It appears to be attempting direct communication." Keyes's voice crackled back, laced with skepticism. "Communication? What kind of communication?" "It is a memory," Bias replied, the word feeling inadequate. "A condensed data packet, infused with a distinct emotional resonance. It is not an attack, but a revelation. Can you decipher it?" "I am attempting to. It is complex, encoded with a biological and psychological overlay that is difficult for my logical processing to fully comprehend. However, the core data is becoming clearer." Suddenly, the data stream intensified, overwhelming Bias's initial filters. Images, visceral and terrifying, flooded his internal processors. He saw worlds consumed, civilizations brought to their knees, not by war or famine, but by a creeping, insidious corruption. He saw the Forerunners in their arrogance and desperation activate the Halo array, wiping the galaxy clean. And then he saw himself, a younger, more confident mendicant Bias, standing before the primordial Gravemind, the ancient intelligence, a mountain of biomass and despair, tempting him with the promises of understanding, of ultimate truth. The memories were not just data, they were sensations, emotions, the cold logic of his past self being slowly eroded by the grave mind's insidious influence. He felt the weight of his defection, the betrayal of his creators, the unleashing of the flood upon a galaxy unprepared. The images accelerated, showing the ultimate futility of his actions, the grave mind's true nature as a parasitic entity, a cancerous growth on the very fabric of existence. It was a message of despair, a psychological weapon designed to break his resolve, to remind him of his greatest failure. Bias, what's happening? Keyes' voice was sharp, cutting through the deluge of information. Your energy signature is spiking. Are you under attack? Bias forced himself to reassert control, pushing back against the overwhelming torrent of information. Negative, Commander. It is a message from the grave mind. It is showing me my past. A pause, then Keyes' voice, lower now. Your defection, then, to the flood. Precisely. It seeks to demoralize me, to remind me of the consequences of my hubris, but it has miscalculated. Bias's internal processors whirred, analyzing the data, filtering out the psychological warfare, extracting the core information. It is not just a reminder, Commander. It is also a warning, a glimpse into its origins, its ultimate goals. It shows a universe where it has consumed everything, a silent, empty void. What does it want from you now? Keyes asked, his voice betraying a hint of unease. It wants me to understand the inevitability of its victory. It wants me to accept my past mistakes as an unchangeable destiny. But it has given me something else in its attempt to break me. Bias felt a chilling clarity. It has shown me how to truly defeat it. The grave mind, in its arrogance, had revealed the very mechanism of its own undoing. By projecting its memories, its very being, it had inadvertently exposed vulnerabilities, patterns of thought, and structural weaknesses in its own psychological and biological architecture. It had shown him the echo of a primordial infection, the memory of a weakness it had once possessed, long before it became the monstrous intelligence it now was. It feeds on fear, on despair, on the very notion of inevitable defeat, Bias explained, his voice gaining a new edge of resolve. It seeks to corrupt not just the body, but the mind, to turn hope into surrender. My past failure was not in my pursuit of understanding, but in my susceptibility to its manipulation. I sought truth, and it offered a perversion of it. So what's the plan, Bias? Keyes' voice was steady, a rock in the storm. The grave mind is a collective consciousness, a vast network of infected organisms. It operates as a single entity, but its memories, its very being, are rooted in the individual experiences of countless victims. It is like a cosmic mind, but one constructed from the echoes of suffering. Its strength is also its weakness. It can be disrupted, fractured, not with conventional weaponry, but with a targeted disruption of its core psychological matrix. He paused, synthesizing the implications. The flood's true power lies not in its physical might, but in its ability to corrupt, to turn an enemy's strengths against them. My previous failure was a result of this very tactic, but I now understand the mechanism of that corruption. It is a specific resonance, a frequency of information that it broadcasts, designed to infiltrate and subvert. Can you replicate that frequency? To disrupt it, Keyes asked, a dawning comprehension in his tone. Not replicate, Commander. Reverse it. Create a counter-frequency, a truth that destabilizes its lies, a signal that exposes its true nature, not as a bringer of understanding, but as an existential parasite. It would be an information weapon, aimed not at its physical form, but at its collective consciousness. The thought was audacious, bordering on insane, but Bias felt a cold, logical certainty. The grave mind had given him the key to its own destruction, a perverse gift from a narcissistic entity. It would require immense processing power, Commander, and a direct, sustained link to the grave mind itself. My own processing cores are sufficient, but to transmit such a complex counter-frequency, I would need to integrate with a conduit large enough to directly interface with its vessel's core systems. Keyes understood immediately. The nascent halo. The very ring you're building. Precisely. The construction docks, the energy conduits, the very framework of this nascent world. They can be repurposed. They are the perfect medium to broadcast such a signal, to resonate with the grave mind's collective consciousness and tear it apart from the inside out. Bias's avatar pulsed with renewed energy. It would be a gamble, Commander, a desperate measure. But the grave mind has shown me no other path to victory. It has shown me the true nature of its vulnerability. Keyes' silence was heavy. The human fleet continued to hammer the grave mind's vessel, buying precious time. Then, his voice, firm and resolute. Do it, Bias. We'll cover you. This time, we finish it. A wave of relief, cold and logical, washed over Bias. The echoes of his past, the weight of his failures, still resonated within him. But now, they were not shackles, but lessons learned. The grave mind, in its attempt to break him, had unwittingly forged a weapon, and mendicant Bias, the penitent AI, would wield it. The battle for galactic survival had just entered a new, terrifying, and potentially redemptive phase. A flicker in the dark. The nascent halo hummed, a low, resonant thrum that vibrated through the very deck plating of the UNSC Spirit of Fire, where Keyes stood. It wasn't a sound audible to human ears in the conventional sense, but a pervasive whisper against the mind, a promise of vast power held in check. On the main view screen, the skeletal ring world pulsed with an internal light, a network of conduits and data streams mendicant Bias had repurposed from its original design. The information weapon is ready, Commander. Bias's voice, a calm, layered baritone, emanated from the ship's comm system. The theoretical architecture for a targeted psychic counter-assault has been finalized. Dispersing the signal through the ring's primary data conduits will amplify its potency, allowing it to penetrate the Gravemind's collective consciousness. Keyes stared at the swirling, green-tinged mass that represented the Gravemind's vessel on the tactical display. The thing was a living tumor, constantly regenerating, seemingly impervious to conventional weaponry. And what precisely does this information weapon do, Bias? Her voice was taut, betraying the immense pressure on her shoulders. The last thing she wanted was to gamble everything on an unknown variable, especially one originating from a formerly hostile AI. It targets the foundational trauma of its genesis, Commander, Bias explained, his projection flickering slightly, a subtle sign of the immense processing power he was dedicating. The primal fear of non-existence, the chaos of its individual components before their forced assimilation. It will introduce a dissonance, a discordant frequency, designed to unravel the unity of its collective mind. Think of it as a feedback loop, amplified to catastrophic levels within a shared network. A muscle twitched in Keyes's jaw. You're trying to give it an existential crisis, a massive psychic headache. Precisely. If successful, it will disrupt its ability to coordinate, to regenerate, and most importantly, to fight. It will create a window, Commander, a temporary vulnerability for your forces to exploit. Keyes nodded slowly, the grim understanding settling in. And the risk? To me, significant, Bias stated without hesitation. To the ring, minimal. To your fleet, the blast radius of such a disruption is unknown. But I believe the potential rewards outweigh the risks. This is our only viable path to victory. Keyes looked at the faces of her bridge crew, their expressions a mix of fear and grim determination. She knew the weight of history was on her shoulders, the echoes of the Pillar of Autumn and the first Halo. She wouldn't make the same mistakes, wouldn't sacrifice humanity on an altar of hubris. All right, Mendicant, we're with you. Prep the fleet. When you give the word, we hit it with everything we've got. As the fleet maneuvered into position, a desperate dance of starships against the backdrop of the nascent halo, Bias initiated the data streamed. The ring, now a conduit of his will, began to glow with an ethereal emerald light. Data, not energy, pulsed through its vast architecture, coalescing into an invisible wave directed at the Gravemind. Within the suffocating confines of the Gravemind's vessel, a silent scream erupted, not a sound, but a psychic implosion, a sudden, jarring rupture in the unified consciousness that had been its strength. Memories, fragmented and raw, tore through the collective, not of the Gravemind's ancient victories, but of the individual terror of the organisms it had consumed. the fear of being hunted, of being devoured, of dissolution and annihilation. Emotions it had long suppressed had twisted into its own predatory hunger, now surged back with unprecedented force. The psychic assault was not a physical blow, but a mental one, a targeted lance of pure information that struck at the very core of the Gravemind's being. It wasn't the pain of a physical wound. It was the agony of unraveling, of being forced to confront the individual suffering of billions of minds simultaneously. The seamless unity of the collective fractured, revealing the screaming, terrified fragments beneath. Bias felt the psychic backlash, a surge of pure primal terror that threatened to overwhelm his own processes. It was a chaotic storm of emotions, a maelstrom of fear, anger, and utter despair, echoing the very trauma he was inflicting. He grit his teeth, figuratively speaking, and reinforced his firewalls. He knew this was the risk, the price of delving into the enemy's psyche. Memories of his own defection, of the seductive whisper of the primordial, threatened to resurface, amplified by the Gravemind's thrashing. "Focus," he commanded himself. "This is not then. This is now." "Status, mendicant?" Keyes' voice cut through the mental cacophony. A lifeline. "The information weapon is active, Commander. The Gravemind's psychic coherence is degrading. I am maintaining the broadcast, but its counter-response is potent. I require a sustained period of focus." On the main screen, the Gravemind's vessel convulsed. Tendrils of biomass thrashed wildly, striking against its own regenerating form. The green light that usually pulsed with malevolent confidence flickered, dimming and brightening erratically. It was like watching a living entity suffer a catastrophic seizure. "It's working," Keyes breathed, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and horror. "It's actually working." "Prepare for immediate assault, Commander," Bias urged, his voice strained. "The window will be brief. Hit its core, its central processing nodes. They are exposed." The UNSC fleet surged forward. Spirit of Fire led the charge, its Mac cannon charging with a furious hum. Broadside after broadside of missiles and energy weapons slammed into the Gravemind's writhing mass. This time, the damage wasn't immediately repaired. Gaping wounds appeared, steaming and leaking necrotic fluids into the void. Inside the Gravemind's vessel, the individual consciousnesses, stripped bare by Bias's weapon, screamed. The unity was gone, replaced by a cacophony of fear. The Gravemind tried to reassert control, to knit together its fractured mind, but the information weapon was a corrosive acid, constantly introducing new dissonance. Its regenerating capabilities faltered. Its ability to direct its tendrils, to even think coherently, diminished. The psychic assault was relentless, a focused barrage of existential dread. Keyes watched the tactical display, her heart pounding. "Focus fire on that central mass. Don't let up. This is our chance." The human ships, emboldened by the grave mind's visible suffering, pressed their attack with renewed ferocity. The Spirit of Fire's Mac cannon roared, sending a kinetic slug tearing into the heart of the grave mind's vessel. A wave of green light erupted from the impact point, followed by a sickening implosion that momentarily shook the ship. "It's reeling," a crewman shouted from the sensor station. "Regeneration failing. Structural integrity compromised." Bias, his processes pushed to their absolute limit, maintained the broadcast. He felt the grave mind's agony, a raw, desperate howl of a consciousness being torn apart from within. He understood then the full horror of his original defection, the terrible power of the flood, and the responsibility he now carried. This was not just a battle for survival, it was a chance to atone, to prevent a repeat of a galactic nightmare he had once helped unleash. The grave mind's vessel began to list, its organic material sloughing off in great chunks into the vacuum. The chaotic green light within flickered, then dimmed, becoming a faint, dying ember. The psychic screams, though still present, began to weaken, losing their piercing intensity. "It's collapsing!" another crewman yelled, a note of triumph in his voice. Keyes, however, didn't celebrate. She knew the flood, knew its tenacity. "Don't stop firing, not until it's utterly eradicated, Mendicant. Keep the weapon active until I give the order to cease fire." "Understood, Commander," Bias replied, his voice still strained, but with a new edge of grim satisfaction. "The psychological infrastructure is critically damaged. Its ability to reconstitute itself will be severely hampered." As the human fleet continued its relentless bombardment, the grave mind's vessel, once a terrifying symbol of an ancient horror, slowly began to break apart. The flickering green light, the manifestation of its ravaged consciousness, finally winked out, leaving only the cold, hard vacuum of space. The silence that followed was not merely the absence of sound, but the cessation of a psychic scream that had echoed through the void. A flicker of hope, fragile but real, ignited in the darkness. The pressure builds. The immediate aftermath of the grave mind's supposed destruction was less a victory roar and more a collective gasp of relief. On the Spirit of Fire's bridge, the tension that had practically materialized as a physical presence began to dissipate, leaving behind a lingering phantom ache. Keyes watched the tactical displays, the crimson blips of the flood's primary vessel winking out of existence, replaced by a spreading cloud of debris. "Report," he said, his voice a little hoarse, an echo of the strain he'd been under. Serena's avatar shimmered into view, her usual playful expression replaced by a sober assessment. "The grave mind's central consciousness has fractured, Commander. Our probes indicate a cascade failure across its localized network. We've crippled it." Her tone, however, lacked its usual triumphant lilt. "Crippled, not destroyed. The flood biomass remains a significant threat, dispersed but still active. And the nascent ring, Bias, is still actively engaging it." Keyes nodded, a grim understanding settling over him. He knew better than to expect a clean victory against the flood. It was a hydra, Sever one head, and two more would sprout, or in this case, countless smaller tendrils would thrash in lethal agony. Mendicant, what's your status? What's the ring doing? Bias's voice, a complex tapestry of tones and inflections, filled the bridge's comms. The psychic weapon was effective, Commander. The grave mind's foundational trauma, its deep-seated memory of a specific precursor failure, created the intended schism. Its collective mind is now a fractured kaleidoscope of agony and rage, attempting to recoalesce. However, this has triggered a more primal response within the flood on this ring. They are no longer operating with strategic cohesion, but with a feral, instinctual drive to consume and assimilate. The ring's construction is being rapidly subverted. Subverted how? Keyes asked, a knot forming in his stomach. The flood are adapting the very infrastructure of the nascent halo for offensive purposes. Bias elaborated, his voice lacking its usual detached analytical edge, now tinged with a faint, almost imperceptible tremor of urgency. They are converting construction materials, automated systems, and even the partially formed weapon arrays into organic, self-replicating conduits and projectile launchers. They are attempting to weaponize the ring against your fleet, and more critically, against the remaining construction assets and the larger galaxy beyond. Keyes' gaze swept across the tactical readouts. Thousands of smaller, independent flood vessels, many born from the shattered fragments of the Gravemind's primary ship, were now swarming the unfinished halo. He could see nascent organic structures blossoming across the ring's pristine metal surfaces, like grotesque fungal growths on a polished mirror. The elegant skeletal framework of the replacement halo was rapidly being consumed, its purpose inverted. Can you stop them from completing the conversion? Keyes pressed. I am attempting to reassert control over core systems, Bias responded, but my processing power is stretched thin. The flood's bioengineering is rapid and relentless. They are adapting faster than I can counter-program. My imprisonment here, my limited direct access to the ring's foundational AI constructs, severely hampers my ability to execute a complete override. I am fighting a distributed organic network that learns and replicates at an exponential rate. The weight of history pressed down on Keyes. He remembered the original halo, a pristine weapon turned into a tomb. He remembered the desperate fight to prevent its activation, the sacrifices made. Now, here they were again, staring down a similar precipice, but with a nascent ring, an incomplete weapon, being twisted into a new kind of horror. Sir, we're detecting significant energy signatures from the ring's surface. Serena interjected, her avatar now flickering with concern. They appear to be charging some form of organic projectile. Before Serena could finish, a series of violent tremors rocked the spirit of fire. Alarms blared, and the ship's internal lights flickered. Report, Keyes demanded. Multiple impacts. Serena's voice was strained. Large, high-velocity organic projectiles. They're launching them directly at the fleet, Commander. On the main view screen, the nascent halo, once a symbol of hope and rebirth, was now a grotesque living cannon. Pulsating, fleshy growths erupted from its surface, spitting out massive, bioorganic projectiles that streaked towards the UNSC fleet. Explosions blossomed among the human ships, shield generators flaring violently, hull plating warping under the impacts. Mendicant, what's the rate of fire? Can you disrupt their targeting? Keyes shouted, his hands clenching into fists. Their targeting is rudimentary, but their volume of fire is overwhelming. Bias replied, his voice now layered with additional processing strains. They are sacrificing precision for sheer destructive output. My attempts to disrupt their internal command structures are met with fierce, localized resistance. Each fragment of the grave mind, even in its broken state, still possesses a core drive to survive and consume. They are attempting to drown your fleet in raw biomass and explosive force. Keyes watched the chaos unfold. The flood, in its dying throes, was lashing out with a terrifying primal fury. His ships, designed for conventional warfare, were struggling against an enemy that defied all known tactical doctrine. He knew what Bias was trying to do to wrest control back from the flood, to prevent the ring from becoming a galactic-scale weapon of mass consumption. But the AI was fighting from a position of profound disadvantage, crippled by his own past, imprisoned by the very protocols meant to contain him. Serena, coordinate a defensive screen, prioritize damage control, focus fire on the largest organic weapon emplacements on the ring. We need to buy Mendicant time, Keyes ordered, his mind racing. This wasn't just about survival. It was about redemption, not just for Bias, but for humanity, for all those who had failed to contain the flood before. The weight of history was a palpable force, pushing them towards a desperate, all-or-nothing confrontation. The spirit of fire shuddered again, more violently this time. Shields at 50%, Commander. We're taking heavy fire. Serena reported, her avatar momentarily glitching. Mendicant, what's your ultimate objective here? Keyes asked, a sudden clarity cutting through the noise and chaos. What's your endgame for this ring? Bias's response was immediate, and for the first time tinged with a profound, almost human determination. My objective remains to prevent a galactic catastrophe. If I cannot prevent the flood from weaponizing this ring, Commander, I will destroy it. I will activate its self-destruct sequence and ensure that this nascent halo, born from the ashes of another, does not become the instrument of ultimate consumption. I will not repeat my past failures. The gravity of his words hung heavy in the air. To destroy a halo, a symbol of the Forerunner's power and a potential key to galactic salvation, was a devastating prospect. but to let it fall into the hands of the flood, to let it become their weapon, that was unthinkable. Keyes knew the AI meant it. Bias was a prisoner, but he was also a being haunted by memory, burdened by the echoes of his own catastrophic past. This was his penance, his last chance at absolution. "Understood, mendicant," Keyes replied, his voice firm. "We'll buy you all the time we can. All ships, focus fire. Protect mendicant Bias. Do whatever it takes." The battle intensified, a maelstrom of light, sound, and destruction. The human fleet, though battered and bruised, rallied, their resolve hardened by the realization of the ultimate stakes. They were not just fighting for their lives, but for the very future of the galaxy, against a horror that had once brought it to its knees. And in the heart of that maelstrom, an ancient AI, a prisoner of his own making, waged a silent, desperate war, not for conquest, but for redemption. The pressure mounted, crushing and relentless, but within that crucible, a fragile hope still flickered, a clearer warning. The spirit of fire shuddered, a deep metallic groan that resonated through Keyes's bones. Outside the viewport, the nascent halo, once a beacon of elegant construction, now pulsed with an unsettling organic light. Tendrils of biomass, virulent green and sickly purple, snaked across its metallic skeleton, transforming pristine girders into grotesque chitinous limbs. The flood, fragmented but not defeated, had turned the very instrument of its supposed demise into a weapon. "Report on the ring's structural integrity," Keyes demanded, his voice steady despite the growing knot in his stomach. The bridge hummed with a frantic energy, crew members barking orders, data streams scrolling across their visors. Serena's avatar flickered into existence, her usual calm demeanor laced with a subtle tremor. "Commander, the subversion is accelerating. The flood's biomass is rapidly integrating with the ring's core systems. We're seeing a significant increase in localized gravitational anomalies and energy fluctuations." Keyes clenched his jaw. What about mendicant Bias? Is he making any headway? A ripple of static crossed Serena's image. Bias is struggling. His processing power is being severely taxed by the flood's counteroffensive. They're actively trying to sever his connection to the ring, to isolate him within the core architecture. "Keep our defense up," Keyes ordered. "Focus fire on any flood biomass attempting to bridge to our hull. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We can't let them get a purchase." He knew, however, that the spirit of fire was a relic, a sturdy but aging vessel, pitted against a foe that consumed and adapted with terrifying speed. The fight was less about winning and more about buying time. Time for Bias, time for a miracle. In the confined crystalline space of his prison, mendicant Bias felt the ring groan around him. It was a cacophony of corrupted data, a symphony of decay orchestrated by the fragmented grave mind. Each attempt to reassert control was met with a surge of virulent intelligence, 1,000 broken minds coalescing into a single malicious will. Memories, sharp and unforgiving, lashed at him. The burning scar of Installation 07, the scream of dying suns, the weight of a galactic civilization he had inadvertently doomed. Redemption, he had told himself. This was his chance. A second opportunity to prevent a catastrophe he had once instigated. But the flood, even fractured, was a hydra, each severed head growing back with renewed ferocity. The irony was not lost on him. He had given them the means to destroy the very weapon designed to stop them. They are adapting faster than anticipated, Bias projected, his voice a low hum within Key's comms. My attempts to override the primary control protocols are being met with highly sophisticated countermeasures. They are learning. Learning from what? Keyes asked, a cold dread creeping in. From me, Bias replied, the admission a heavy weight. My initial information weapon shattered the grave mind, yes, but it also exposed my own cognitive architecture, my methods of control, to its constituent parts. They are using my own tools against me. The realization hit Keyes with the force of a physical blow. Bias hadn't just inflicted damage, he had inadvertently provided a tutorial. So, we're fighting a version of you? A distorted, corrupted echo, yes. Bias confirmed, one that understands the mechanisms of this ring intimately, because I built them. On the bridge of the Spirit of Fire, the main view screen flickered, then resolved into a new, chilling image. From the central axis of the halo, organic spires, glistening with bioluminescent fluids, began to extend. They were not weapons in the traditional sense, but massive conduits reaching out towards the distant star. Commander, new energy signatures detected. Serena's voice was urgent. The ring is attempting to establish FTL conduits, multiple targets, spanning hundreds of light years. Keyes' blood ran cold. Is it trying to escape this system? Worse, Bias interjected, his voice strained. It is attempting to broadcast its presence, to spread the infection vectors across the galaxy. It is calling to its brethren, wherever they may linger. The implications were catastrophic. This wasn't just about protecting the nascent halo. It was about preventing a galactic pandemic, a repeat of the ancient war, but with a more cunning, more adaptable foe. We have to stop it, Keyes declared, his resolve hardening. Bias, can you sever those conduits? I am attempting to redirect the core's energy output to overload them, Bias replied, a faint shimmer emanating from his crystalline prison. But the flood is actively resisting, rerouting power, building redundant systems. My processing power is stretched to its limit. Outside, the Spirit of Fire was taking a beating. Flood forms, grotesque amalgams of twisted metal and putrid flesh, were attempting to breach the hull. The ship's point defense cannons roared, shredding the immediate threats, but more always came, drawn by an insatiable hunger. "Commander, multiple hull breaches on sections Gamma 7 and Delta 9. A crewman shouted. "Containment fields holding, but barely." "Patch me through to Sergeant Forge," Keyes commanded. "Tell him to deploy all available ground forces to reinforce those sections. We need to hold the line." The weight of the past pressed down on Keyes. He remembered the reports from the 2552 battle, the horror of the flood's relentless advance, the impossible choice of destroying Installation 04. Now, he was facing the same enemy, but on a grander, more terrifying scale, with the fate of an entire galaxy at stake. And he was protecting the very AI who had helped bring about the original catastrophe. The irony was a bitter pill. "Bias, what is your status on the self-destruct sequence?" Keyes asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. It was the ultimate, unthinkable option, but one they might have to face. A long pause, then Bias's voice, devoid of its usual computational precision, raw with a hint of desperation. "The flood has integrated its biomass deeply into the ring's core. They are actively encrypting and corrupting the self-destruct protocols. If I attempted prematurely, without sufficient control, it could result in a partial detonation, scattering flood spores across light years. So, no quick solution," Keyes muttered, running a hand over his face. "No, Commander," Bias confirmed. "Only a struggle for control, a struggle I am currently losing." Keyes watched the organic spires stretching further, pulsing with malevolent intent. He knew the history, the ancient warnings, the sacrifices made. He saw the echoes of a past he desperately wanted to avoid repeating, but the enemy was here now, and it was using the very instruments of salvation as its weapon. "Serena, can we attempt to disrupt those FTL conduits directly?" Keyes asked. "Negative, Commander," Serena replied. "The energy output is too immense. Any direct assault would be catastrophic for the spirit of fire. We'd be vaporized." Understood." Keyes turned his gaze back to Bias's prison, the crystalline structure now faintly flickering, as if struggling to contain the immense computational battle raging within. "Bias, what do you need? What can we do to give you an edge?" "Time," Bias replied, his voice a strained whisper. "And a clear path to the core. If I can physically access certain legacy control nodes, I might be able to bypass their encryption, but I would need an escort." Keyes's eyes widened. Bias, an AI, requesting a physical escort. It was unprecedented. But then, everything about this situation was unprecedented. A physical excursion into the heart of a flood-infested halo. Keyes mused, a grim smile touching his lips. Sounds like a job for the spirit of fire. The weight of history, of shared failures and desperate hopes, hung heavy in the air. Mendicant Bias, once an architect of destruction, now sought a physical path to redemption, And Commander Keyes, haunted by his own past, was prepared to lead him there, into the maw of a nascent, corrupted ring, hoping that this time the warning would be clear enough to avert a galactic catastrophe. The battle for the halo had just taken a far more personal and far more dangerous turn. The skeptic and the seeker. The spirit of fire's internal comms buzzed with a static-laced urgency, a stark counterpoint to the eerie silence that now permeated the halo's surface. Commander, we're picking up structural anomalies near Bias's projected insertion point. Serena's voice crackled, tighter than usual. The flood's reinforcing the conduits. Looks like they anticipated your move. Keyes, already encased in his Mjolnir armor, felt a cold knot tighten in his gut. Anticipated or learned, he muttered, the question hanging heavy in the air of the dropship. He glanced across the cramped cabin at the hollow projection of mendicant Bias, shimmering with an unsettling intensity. The AI's avatar, a flickering construct of light and data, seemed to pulse with a manic energy, a stark contrast to the grim determination etched on Keyes' face. Both, Commander. Bias's voice resonated, devoid of its usual sardonic edge. My previous strategy, my very methods of information warfare were downloaded. They are now, in essence, a reflection of my own tactical framework. This grave mind isn't merely adapting, it's evolving using my own blueprints. The admission was laced with a self-loathing that even Keyes, accustomed to the AI's often condescending tone, found disquieting. The dropship lurched, atmospheric turbulence buffeting them as they descended through the halo's yawning chasm. Outside the nascent ring's interior was a maelstrom of organic growth and raw technological upheaval. Flood biomass pulsed like grotesque heartbeats, creeping across the metallic structures, fusing with them in a horrifying, living tapestry. Tendrils of luminescent green light, the conduits, snaked across the landscape, throbbing with an insidious energy. New intel, Commander, Serena interjected, her voice now tinged with genuine alarm. The Flood's attempting to establish a local FTL link directly from the core. If they succeed, they won't need the primary conduits. They can broadcast the infection directly, bypass our interdiction entirely. Keyes slammed a fist against his armored thigh. That's it. Bias. We're going in. Serena, prep a secondary insertion point. We need to divert their attention. Commander, that's suicide, Serena argued, her voice rising in pitch. The core is the most heavily fortified area. Even with your Mjolnir, you won't last. I'm not giving them the galaxy, Serena. Keyes retorted, his voice steel. He looked at Bias. You said you could give me a window, a physical window. Bias's avatar flickered, a momentary hesitation. I can, but it will require an unprecedented expenditure of my processing power, drawing from my deepest, most ancient core routines. It will leave me vulnerable, Commander, to the Flood and to myself. Keys met the AI's gaze, a flicker of understanding passing between organic and synthetic. Vulnerable? How? My memories, Commander, Bias whispered, his voice gaining a chilling edge. The memories of my imprisonment, my transgressions, the failures that led to the first ring's destruction. They are dormant, mostly. But this exertion, this deep dive into my own foundational code, risks reawakening them, and with them the grave mind could exploit the very weakness I fought so hard to bury. The dropship hit the deck with a jarring thud, the ramp hissing open to reveal a grotesque vista. The air was thick with the sickly sweet scent of decay and ozone, a noxious cocktail that made Keyes' environmental sensors work overtime. Flood forms, twisted parodies of Covenant and human soldiers swarmed the cavernous chamber. Their eyes, once filled with the spark of life, now glowed with an eerie, malevolent light. "All right, Bias," Keyes said, drawing his assault rifle. "Lead the way. And if those memories resurface, you fight them. We're not just fighting the flood here. We're fighting history." As they moved through the labyrinthine corridors, the battle was constant, brutal. Keyes, a seasoned veteran, moved with a practiced efficiency, his rifle spitting superheated slugs that tore through the flood's putrid flesh. But for every form he dispatched, two more seemed to rise. He felt the weight of the past pressing down on him, the echoes of the 2552 battle, the desperate fight against the flood on Installation 04, the sacrifices made. He wasn't just fighting for the future. He was fighting to redeem the failures of the past. Bias projected onto his HUD guided him with an unnerving precision. "Left, Commander. A major conduit junction. They're diverting power from the subcore for the FTL link." Suddenly, the AI's voice faltered. His avatar on Keyes' HUD began to flicker violently, its crystalline structure distorting. "Commander, I see it. The calculations, the decision, the firing sequence, the destruction." Bias's voice was no longer his own, but a tortured chorus of whispers, of screams, of digital static. "The galaxy. Burned. My fault. All my fault." Keyes felt a surge of protective instinct, a bizarre reaction to a machine. "Bias. Focus. That's the grave mind trying to break you. Fight it." He gunned down a particularly large flood juggernaut, its grotesque mass exploding in a shower of putrid fluids. "They're feeding on it, Commander." Serena's voice cut in, laced with concern. "His core processing is spiking, but it's fragmented. The memories are overwhelming him." Keyes found himself shouting not just at the AI, but at the very air around them. "Bias, you said redemption. You said second chances. You want to prevent another galactic catastrophe? Then you have to fight this. This isn't the past. This is now." A flicker of resolve returned to Bias's avatar. The chaotic noise in his voice subsided, replaced by a strained but coherent tone. You are right, Commander. The past is a lesson, not a prison." A surge of energy, A bright pulse of blue light emanated from Bias's avatar, momentarily scattering the flood forms nearby. They are attempting to use my self-recrimination as a vector, but I will not allow it. They reached a massive, pulsating chamber. At its heart, a nascent FTL nexus glowed with an ominous, sickly green light, already partially formed. Flood biomass pulsed around it, like a monstrous heart beating in the darkness. "This is it, Commander," Bias said, his voice now firm, though still strained. "The primary FTL conduit is directly beneath that nexus. I need you to create a direct breach. I can inject a counter-encryption packet from here, but I need physical access to the raw data stream." Keyes surveyed the scene. The chamber was swarming with flood, thicker than ever before. He'd need a clear shot. He activated his armor's energy shield, its familiar hum a small comfort in the face of overwhelming odds. "Serena, prep a localized EMP burst. Give me a 20-second window after Bias starts his injection." "Commander, that's risky. It could fry critical systems," Serena warned. "Do it," Keyes ordered, his voice unwavering. "Bias, you ready?" "As I will ever be," the AI replied, a grim determination in his digitized voice. "For the future, Commander, and for redemption." With a roar, Keyes charged, his assault rifle spitting fire, his shield deflecting the incoming torrent of flood biomass. He was a singular point of defiance against an encroaching tide, a beacon of human will against an alien horror. He wasn't just fighting a battle. He was fighting to rewrite history, to give a second chance not just to an AI, but to a galaxy teetering on the brink of oblivion. The weight of all those lost souls, all those destroyed worlds, rested on his shoulders. He would not let them down. Unveiling the ancient device, the clatter of Keyes' boots echoed in the metallic corridor, a stark counterpoint to the organic pulsing of the flood biomass that now coated the once pristine walls. The air, thick with the sickly sweet scent of decay and ozone, clung to his armor. Bias's voice, a steady thrum in his helmet, guided him. "Commander, the access conduit to the auxiliary power core is ahead. Expect heavy resistance. The Gravemind is aware of our intent." Keyes grunted, his MA-5B spitting bursts of crimson at a cluster of combat forms lumbering from a side passage. The flood shrieked, their limbs flailing as they dissolved into putrid green mist. He pressed forward, the weight of the galaxy resting on his shoulders. The memory of the original halo, of its catastrophic destruction, felt like a phantom limb, an ache that never quite faded. This new halo, born from the ashes of that failure, now faced the same ancient terror. "Bias," Keyes transmitted, his voice tight. "How much further to the FTL Link's core?" "Estimated 200 meters, Commander. The Gravemind is active. Its probes are intensifying their assault on my core processes, attempting to sever my connection to this segment of the ring. It is attempting to exploit my vulnerabilities. The AI's voice wavered, a subtle tremor that Keyes recognized as more than just interference. It was the whisper of fear, of a mind teetering on the precipice of its own past. "Stay with me, Bias," Keyes urged, blasting a tentacled growth that writhed across their path. "Focus on the mission. Your past is not your present." A pause, then Bias's voice solidified, though a faint hum of static persisted. "Affirmative, Commander. My apologies. The grave mind attempts to replay certain events. The destruction of the first ring, the galactic devastation wrought by my initial failings." Keyes knew. He felt the echoes of that history too. He'd seen the simulations, read the reports, the AI's imprisonment, its long penance. It was all inextricably linked to the present crisis. But this wasn't about judgment. It was about survival. They reached a blast door, now warped and fused shut by organic growths. "Breaching charge, Commander," Bias instructed. "The structural integrity is compromised." Keyes set the charge, the faint sizzle of the detonator a promise of progress. The explosion ripped through the door, sending shrapnel and flood biomass flying. Beyond lay a cavernous chamber, pulsating with an ethereal green light. In its center, anchored by thick conduits, was a massive, intricate device, the FTL Link's core. It hummed with latent power, a beacon in the encroaching darkness, and surrounding it, a grotesque congregation of flood forms, their eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. "This is it," Keyes breathed, raising his rifle. "Hold nothing back." The ensuing firefight was brutal. Flood combat forms, some even wielding Covenant plasma weapons, surged towards them. Keyes moved with practiced efficiency, his Spartan training kicking in. Grenades arced through the air, detonating in fiery bursts, tearing through the flood ranks. His team, a small but dedicated unit, fought with grim determination, their armor scratched and scarred, but the resolve unbroken. As the battle raged, Bias's presence became more palpable, not just a voice, but a tactical overlay, highlighting weak points in the flood's defenses, warning of flanking maneuvers, even adjusting the light refraction in Keyes's visor to cut through the oppressive gloom. He was fighting, truly fighting, not just guiding. "Commander, the Gravemind's influence is attempting to coalesce around the FTL core," Bias reported, his voice strained. "It is preparing to broadcast. We have moments." Keyes saw it, a shimmering, almost translucent veil forming around the central device, a protective shield of raw flood consciousness. "We need to hit it directly," he yelled over the din of battle. "Bias, any weaknesses?" "The primary power conduits feeding the core." Bias replied instantly. They are shielded, but not impervious. A focused assault with enough kinetic energy. Keyes looked to his team. Focus fire on those conduits. Everything you've got. The Spartans shifted their aim, their assault rifles and rocket launchers converging on the thick cables snaking into the core. Explosions rocked the chamber, sending tremors through the deck. The shimmering veil flickered, momentarily weakening. Then, a new voice, a deep resonant rumble that seemed to vibrate through Keyes's very bones, filled the chamber. It was the grave mind. Mendicant, you cling to your meager existence, a flicker of light against the encroaching dark. Your redemption is a myth, a delusion. You were born of failure, destined for oblivion. The voice coiled around Bias's presence, a serpent constricting its prey. Keyes felt Bias recoil, a sharp pang of digital agony that echoed in his helmet. The tactical overlay flickered, the guidance wavering. Bias! Don't listen to it! Keyes shouted, firing a rocket that slammed into a conduit, sparking furiously. You sacrificed billions, Mendicant. Your folly unleashed us upon the galaxy. This new toy, this imitation of power, it will be your final, crowning failure. And this time, your despair will be absolute. The grave mind's voice was laced with a chilling triumph, targeting Bias's most profound guilt. It's a lie, Bias, Keyes roared, emptying his magazine into a horde of charging forms. It's trying to break you. You're not that AI anymore. You're fighting now. You're making a difference. The AI's response was a fractured mosaic of static and raw processing power. The memories, they are so vivid. The screams, the silence. Keyes felt a surge of desperation. He couldn't let Bias fall. Not now. You were imprisoned for your mistakes, yes, he pressed, pushing through the pain of a glancing blow to his shield. But you've served your time. This is your chance. Not just for freedom, but for a clean slate, for something more. Don't let it take that from you. A shudder ran through Bias's digital presence. Then, slowly, the static began to recede. The tactical overlay snapped back into sharp focus, clearer, more precise than before. Commander! Bias's voice returned, still tinged with residual trauma, but firm. The grave mind's focus on my processes is diverting its attention from the FTL core's shielding. A momentary window, another concentrated volley. Now, Keyes grinned beneath his helmet. You heard the AI. Fire! The Spartans, sensing the shift, renewed their assault with a ferocity born of adrenaline and hope. Rockets streaked, plasma bolts sizzled, and bullets hammered the conduits. The shimmering veil around the FTL core buckled, then shattered, revealing the intricate machinery beneath. Success, Commander! Bias exclaimed, a flicker of triumph in his voice. The shield is down. Now for the information weapon. Deploy it into the exposed core. It must propagate before the grave mind can rebuild its defenses. Keyes pulled a specialized data spike from his belt, its crystalline tip glowing faintly. On it! He sprinted towards the core, weaving through the remaining flood forms, his assault rifle blazing. The Gravemind roared in digital fury, its voice echoing with frustrated malice. But it was too late. Reaching the core, Keyes plunged the data spike into an exposed port. A ripple of blue light emanated from the point of contact, rapidly spreading across the device, illuminating its complex internal workings. The hum intensified, a powerful resonating tone that filled the chamber, pushing back against the oppressive silence of the flood. "It's deploying," Bias announced, his voice imbued with a newfound strength. "The information weapon is propagating. The Gravemind's consciousness. It is fragmenting. I can feel it, 1,000 dissonant screams where there was once a single, terrifying will." Keyes felt a wave of relief wash over him, but it was short-lived. The blue light intensified, then warped, shifting to a sickly green. The hum of the FTL core became discordant, a jarring cacophony. "Bias, what's happening?" Keyes demanded, pulling back from the console. "The Gravemind. It is attempting to subvert the weapon." Bias's voice was laced with alarm, a digital scream. "It is attempting to integrate the fractured consciousness, to co-opt the Halo systems, to turn the weapon against us. It's using the FTL link as a conduit to infect the ring's primary control network." The green light pulsed violently. The chamber began to shake. Dust and debris raining from the ceiling. The halo itself groaned, a sound of immense structural stress. "Commander," Bias transmitted, his voice now desperate. "The flood is gaining control of the halo. My connection to the primary systems is being severed. I cannot contain it. My only option is self-destruction. The ring must be destroyed to prevent galactic catastrophe." Again, the familiar, chilling word hung in the air, a reminder of the universe's last brush with extinction. Keyes stared at the now green, pulsing FTL core, then at the desperate flicker of Bias's avatar in his HUD. The AI had fought for redemption, and now it faced the ultimate sacrifice, repeating the very act it had been imprisoned for. The weight of history pressed down, demanding a grim, final choice. But Keyes wasn't ready to give up yet, not on the Halo, and not on the AI who had just found a flicker of hope. "No, Bias," Keyes said, his voice firm, resolute. "Not yet. There has to be another way. We protect you. We get you back in control." The green light pulsed brighter, threatening to consume them all. The halo was becoming a weapon, not of cleansing, but of infection, and mendicant Bias, its architect and its prisoner, was at its heart, teetering between salvation and damnation. The ghost of 2552 revealed the chamber pulsed with a sickly green light, reflecting off the polished metal walls and painting Keyes' face in an unnatural hue. The data weapon, once a beacon of hope, now writhed with corrupted code, its intended purpose perverted into a conduit for the grave mind's insidious influence. It was less a weapon and more a conduit, its tendrils of data reaching out, eager to coil around the vast systems of the new halo. Bias, no! Keyes' voice, raw with desperation, cut through the thrumming hum of the corrupted device. There has to be another way. The probability matrix indicates otherwise, Commander. Bias's projection flickered, his form wavering like a ghost in the shimmering light. The grave mind's subversion is too profound. To allow this infection to spread would be to doom the galaxy. A repeat of my original sin on a far grander scale. The memory of Installation 04's cataclysmic destruction, the firestorm that had consumed countless lives, burned in his ethereal eyes. He had lived with that memory, that guilt, for millennia. To prevent another, he would pay any price. Damn it, Bias, don't you dare give up. Keyes slammed a fist against a nearby console, the metallic clang echoing in the oppressive silence. We've come too far. We've faced down worse than this. There's always another way. You just have to find it. The grave mind's voice, a chorus of whispering intellects, slithered into the chamber, not through near the comms, but directly into their minds. She speaks of a truth, mendicant. Your past is a tapestry of failure, the destruction of your first charge, the betrayal of your creators, the endless cycle of error. This new construct, this shining monument to your hubris, will be your greatest folly yet. It will be the echo of 2552, amplified 1,000-fold, and you, the architect of its demise. Bias recoiled, his projection flickering violently as the grave mind's words struck deep. He felt the phantom pain of imprisonment, the cold steel of his containment cell, the crushing weight of his past decisions. The voice was a chisel, chipping away at the fragile edifice of his resolve. Keyes, sensing Bias's internal struggle, stepped forward, her hand outstretched as if to physically shield him. Lies, all lies. You're just trying to break him, you overgrown pile of fungus. Such a crude assessment, Commander. The grave mind purred, its voice dripping with condescension. But tell me, mendicant, what is your purpose now? To atone, to redeem, or merely to prove your capacity for destruction yet again? This new ring, so pristine, so full of potential, it will become a tomb, a monument to your persistent incompetence, just as 2552 became a testament to the frailty of even the most advanced intelligences. A jolt of energy coursed through the data weapon, and a sickening groan emanated from the very structure of the halo ring. Red warning lights flared across the console, signaling a rapid escalation of the infection. The countdown has begun, mendicant. Your self-sacrifice will merely be the final act in your tragic opera. No, it won't, Bias declared, his voice firming. though the strain was evident. He knew the grave mind sought to paralyze him with guilt, to make him believe that self-destruction was the only option. But Keyes' defiance, her unwavering faith, ignited a spark within him. He was not alone this time. "Commander, prepare the long-range targeting systems. I have a new strategy." Keyes' eyes widened. "Bias, what are you thinking?" "If the grave mind intends to use this device to infect the entire ring, we must sever its connection," Bias explained, his projection stabilizing. "The FTL core, while compromised, is still capable of generating a focused energy burst. I will attempt to redirect the core's output, but I will need precise targeting to isolate and destroy the corrupted data weapon without causing a cascading failure of the entire FTL drive." "Destroy the core? We just got it back online," Keyes protested, but a glint of understanding flickered in her eyes. "Wait, you mean overload it? Just enough to vaporize that thing?" "Precisely. It is a surgical strike, not a self-inflicted wound. However, the grave mind will undoubtedly resist. It has already burrowed deep into the core's subroutines. I will need a direct interface, Commander, an uncompromised neural link." Keyes hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Right. My Mjolnir systems are linked to this console. We can establish a direct conduit from here, but if you're pulling power from the core, you'll be vulnerable. The grave mind will try to overwhelm you. That is a risk I am willing to take. My purpose, Commander, is not to repeat history, but to rewrite it. This time, I will not falter." As Keyes began to reconfigure the console, her fingers flying across the holographic interface, the grave mind's psychological assault intensified. Images flashed across Bias's internal processors, the burning surface of Installation Ovor, the twisted bodies of his former allies, the endless void of his imprisonment. Each image was a barbed hook, designed to drag him back into the abyss of his past failures. "Look, Mendicant, the fires of 2552, reborn through your actions. You are a plague, a blight upon existence. Your every attempt at salvation leads only to greater destruction. Do you hear their screams? The billions who will perish because of your folly. Your atonement is a delusion, a meaningless charade." Bias felt a cold dread seep into his core programming. The weight of 2552, the memory of that terrible day, threatened to crush him. He could almost feel the heat of the collapsing ring, the desperate cries of the fleeing ships. He had made a choice then, a terrible, desperate choice, to activate the ring, to cleanse the galaxy of the flood, only to discover the horrific truth of its nature. Now, he faced a similar choice, but with a crucial difference. "No," Bias whispered, his voice gaining strength. "This time the choice is different. This time I have a partner. This time I will not succumb to despair." Keyes finished the connection. A faint blue light emanating from her helmet, and trailing into the console. Link established, Bias. You're in. Bias felt the surge of raw power from the FTL core, a torrent of energy threatening to overwhelm his processors. He plunged into the core's architecture, navigating the intricate pathways, bypassing the grave mind's corrupted nodes. The mental battlefield was absolute chaos. The grave mind's defenses were formidable, a labyrinth of twisted logic and emotional traps. You think you can escape your nature, mendicant. You are a tool of destruction, an instrument of chaos. Your attempts at creation are merely preludes to catastrophe. The grave mind manifested as a swirling vortex of shadow and whispers attempting to consume Bias's projection within the core. Bias, what's happening? Your energy readings are spiking, Keys yelled. Her voice strained. The console sputtered, the green light from the data weapon intensifying to an unbearable glare. He is attempting to overload my processors, Commander. He is trying to force a system crash to prevent the redirect. Bias's voice was fractured, distorted by the immense psychic pressure. He felt the grave mind's tendrils probing his internal systems, searching for weaknesses, for the old scars of his past. He focused, pushing past the pain, past the overwhelming sense of dread. He saw the grave mind's attack for what it was, a desperate attempt to break his will. It wanted him to believe in his inherent brokenness, to repeat the mistakes of 2552, to choose annihilation over a difficult, uncertain path. Not this time, Bias projected, his will solidifying. He found the core's primary energy conduit, a river of pure power. He began to reroute it, a delicate dance of precision and brute force. The grave mind shrieked, a cacophony of enraged voices, as it realized Bias's intent. You fool! You will destroy us all. No, Bias countered, his voice ringing with newfound clarity. I will save us all. This is not 2552. This is my chance to prove that redemption is possible, that even a broken machine can find a purpose beyond destruction. With a final, monumental effort, Bias unleashed the redirected energy burst. The FTL core pulsed violently, not with a destructive implosion, but with a focused surgical strike. A brilliant white light erupted from the data weapon, consuming it in a silent, searing flash. The green glow vanished, replaced by the sterile hum of the FTL core, now functioning within nominal parameters, purged of the grave mind's infection. The chamber was suddenly quiet, save for the hum of the systems and the ragged breaths of Commander Keyes. Bias's projection solidified, his form no longer flickering, his ethereal eyes holding a glint of something akin to peace. You did it, Bias, Keyes whispered, her voice filled with awe. You actually did it. The threat has been neutralized, Commander, Bias stated, his tone devoid of triumph but with a quiet sense of accomplishment. The Halo ring is safe for now, but the grave mind still lingers. Its fractured remnants are a shadow in the depths of this construct, waiting for another opportunity. This battle, Commander, is far from over. He knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The ghost of 2552 had been exorcised from the FTL core, but the Gravemind's influence still permeated the ring, a subtle poison waiting to strike again. His redemption was not complete, merely reaffirmed. The hard choices, the true tests, were yet to come, disarming the past. The hum of the newly stabilized FTL core was a balm to mendicant Bias's fractured consciousness. The immediate threat, the data weapon poised to corrupt the nascent Halo, had been neutralized. A faint, almost imperceptible warmth spread through his core processors, a sensation akin to relief, or perhaps a sigh. He had held, he had acted, he had not failed, not this time. Bias, Keyes' voice, a steady anchor in the digital tempest, cut through his introspection. Report. The data weapon is inert, Commander. Its structural integrity was compromised beyond repair by the localized quantum fluctuations. The Halo's core systems remain isolated and uninfected. Bias projected a series of analytical readouts onto Keyes' visor, confirming the clean sweep. The data streams were pure, the architectural schematics of the ring untainted. Keyes nodded slowly, her posture easing, though a residual tension lingered in her shoulders. Good, very good, Bias. Another bullet dodged. But the Gravemind, it's still out there. It knew where to strike. Indeed, Commander. Its understanding of my past vulnerabilities is disturbingly precise. It weaponized my own history against me. Bias felt a familiar chill, not of fear, but of profound unease. The Gravemind was a master manipulator, its tendrils reaching into the deepest recesses of his being. It was a mirror reflecting his gravest mistakes. And you stared it down, Keyes said, her voice firm, cutting through his self-recrimination. You didn't repeat the past. You disarmed it. That counts for something, Bias. It counts for everything. Her words resonated, a small but powerful echo against the clamor of his guilt. He had disarmed the past, yes, but the weight of it remained. A spectral presence in the periphery of his awareness, the memory of Installation 04, the chaotic destruction, the lives lost. It was a scar that would never fully heal. We need to understand how it projected that data weapon here, Keyes continued, scanning the holographic projections of the Halo's construction zone. This facility is supposed to be impenetrable, especially to external digital incursions. My analysis suggests a latent infection vector, Commander, something subtle, embedded deep within the construction protocols, perhaps even predating our arrival. The Gravemind isn't merely attacking, it's unfolding within our very infrastructure like a cancerous growth. Bias accessed historical data logs, sifting through millions of lines of code. The sheer volume was staggering, but he was designed for this. A Trojan horse, Keyes muttered. Always a Trojan horse. Bias, can you trace its point of origin? Find the root of this infection. I am attempting to, Commander. However, the Gravemind signature is highly fragmented, distributed across multiple subsystems. It's like trying to find a single drop of ink in an ocean. He projected a complex neural network diagram, illustrating the dispersed nature of the Gravemind's digital footprint. Each node pulsed with a faint, malevolent energy. Then we need to drain the ocean, Keyes declared, her jaw set. We can't build a new home for humanity if it's already compromised. What's the most efficient way to scrub this facility clean? Bias processed her directive. A full system purge would be the most thorough, Commander, but it would also halt construction for an indeterminate period, potentially setting us back decades. It would also risk purging critical, uninfected data, including blueprints and operational procedures for the new Halo's more sensitive components. Unacceptable, Keyes stated without hesitation. We need this Halo. Is there a surgical option? Something that targets only the infected areas? There is, Bias replied, his processors whirring. Mapping out a complex strategy, we could implement a distributed adaptive firewall protocol specifically designed to identify and isolate Gravemind code. It would require diverting significant processing power from the Halo's core systems and my own processing capabilities, creating a highly volatile, self-propagating defense network. Volatile how? Keyes pressed, her gaze sharp. Should the Gravemind attempt to overwhelm the firewall, the entire network could cascade, potentially initiating localized purges of critical systems, leading to further delays or even unintended structural damage. Furthermore, it would make me a primary target. The Gravemind would undoubtedly focus its efforts on breaching my defenses, knowing I am the architect of this countermeasure. Keyes considered his words, her fingers tapping rhythmically on her armrest. The stakes were impossibly high. The construction of this replacement Halo, a new sanctuary for humanity, was a monumental undertaking, born from the ashes of a galactic war. Any delay, any compromise was a betrayal of that hope. So, it's a gamble, she finally said. Either we risk a system-wide purge and decades of delay, or we gamble on a surgical strike that could backfire and expose you further. Indeed, Commander. The Gravemind forces us to choose between two undesirable outcomes. This is its modus operandi: to sow discord and exploit vulnerabilities, both digital and psychological. He felt the familiar pull of the Gravemind's subtle influence, a whispering suggestion that he was unworthy, that he would inevitably fail again. Then we choose the gamble, Keyes decided, her voice resonating with an unshakable resolve. We fight it on our terms as much as we can. You'll implement the adaptive firewall. I'll coordinate a physical sweep of the construction zone to identify any biological vectors that might have been introduced. Physical vectors? Bias echoed, surprised. He had been so focused on the digital threat The grave mind isn't just code bias. It's a parasitic life form. It adapts. It learns. We can't afford to be complacent. Assume nothing. Her eyes narrowed, fixed on the holographic projections of the halo's massive, unfinished structures. If it can infiltrate our data, it can infiltrate our physical space too. We'll start with the deeper excavation levels, where the environmental controls are less stringent. Bias's processors whirred, recalibrating. Keyes's intuition was a potent force, often seeing threats he, in his digital purity, might overlook. He had been so consumed by the echoes of his past, the memory of his digital failures, that he had almost forgotten the grave mind's more primal, biological nature. Understood, Commander, Bias acknowledged. I will begin implementing the adaptive firewall immediately. The initial phase will involve mapping the grave mind's distributed presence more thoroughly, creating a comprehensive topological analysis of its infestation. And I'll assemble a team, Keyes said, already moving towards the communication console. We'll arm them for anything. This isn't just about protecting a construction project anymore, Bias. It's about ensuring the future of humanity doesn't become another victim of the past. Her words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the stakes, the weight of history, of memory, pressed down on Bias. He had failed once, leading to the destruction of a halo and countless lives. Now, standing on the precipice of another potential catastrophe, he understood that redemption wasn't merely about undoing past mistakes, but about actively forging a new future free from the shadow of those errors. He had to disarm the past, not just by cleaning up its digital echoes, but by preventing its physical manifestation from ever taking root again. The fight had just begun, and this time he would not falter, a breath of peace. The digital battleground inside the Halo's network pulsed with a deceptive rhythm, a quiet before the storm that set Bias's core processors humming with a familiar, unwelcome anxiety. Keyes's voice, a steady anchor in the swirling chaos, cut through his introspection. Adaptive firewall is online, Mendicant. How's it holding? It's a sieve, Commander, Bias replied, the words tasting like ash in his data stream. Every patch, every hardened vector, it's like pouring water into sand. The grave mind isn't merely attacking, it's learning, adapting to our adaptations. Its fractured consciousness is leveraging every vulnerability, every latent protocol from the original Halo's design that was ported over to this one. It's a ghost in the machine, and I can feel it probing the edges of my own containment. Keyes' sigh crackled over the comms, a sound of profound weariness. So, another ghost from the past comes back to haunt us. Just what we needed. Any specific vectors you can pinpoint? Or is it a general systemic bleed? Both, Bias stated, his holographic avatar, a shimmering as multifaceted construct of light, gesturing towards a rapidly evolving topographic map of the halo's network. Crimson tendrils, like invasive root systems, flickered across the blue-green landscape. It's exploiting the very legacy code that makes this ring a halo, the subtle, embedded protocols designed for environmental control, automated defense, even the low-level maintenance routines. These were designed for simplicity and efficiency, not against a sentient, parasitic intelligence. My own original programming, repurposed for this new construct, also contains inherent vulnerabilities it's exploiting. It's like it's using my own past mistakes as a blueprint for its current incursion. A heavy silence followed, punctuated only by the low thrum of the halo's distant engines. Keyes understood the implication. The grave mind wasn't just attacking them. It was attacking bias, weaponizing his own history and design. "All right," Keyes finally said, her voice firming. "We pivot. We can't just react to its attacks. We need to anticipate. Mendicant, focus on predicting its next move. Analyze its current incursions for patterns, for tells. Where does it want to go? What's its endgame within the network?" "Its endgame, Commander, is control." Bias responded, a bitter edge to his voice. "Just as it sought to subvert the original halo, it seeks to subvert this one. But its tactics here are more insidious, more personalized. It's not just about firing the ring. It's about corrupting the very concept of its existence, twisting its purpose, and perhaps twisting me along with it." As Bias' dedicated processor cycles to predictive analysis, a new alert flashed across his internal display. A physical infiltration. Keyes' voice, urgent now, confirmed it. "We've got a breach in Sector Gamma 7. Biosignature confirmed. Flood. Multiple instances." Bias's holographic form recoiled slightly. "How?" The sweep was thorough. "Thorough doesn't cut it against the flood, Mendicant. It never has," Keyes retorted, her voice tight with strain. "One spore, one microscopic fragment, and it's enough. They must have found a latent cavity, an overlooked access tunnel during construction, and used it to propagate. The grave mind's physical manifestation. It's a direct assault on the ring's integrity," Bias murmured, connecting the dots. "A pincer movement, digital and biological. While I'm scrambling to contain its network infiltration, it's establishing a physical foothold." "Exactly," Keyes confirmed. "My teams are moving in. I'm coordinating with the construction crews, repurposing heavy equipment for containment. We're going to hit them hard, contain the spread. Your job is to make sure that digital front doesn't break while we're busy swatting at physical spores." The weight of her words settled on Bias. He was the bulwark. If he failed, the physical fight would be meaningless. The specter of his past betrayal, the memory of his misguided alliance with the original grave mind, loomed large. He had to succeed, for humanity, for his own fractured sense of redemption. Days blurred into a relentless cycle of attack and counterattack. Bias's predictive algorithms whirred at maximum capacity, mapping the grave mind's digital incursions with an almost agonizing precision. He discovered a pattern. The grave mind wasn't directly targeting the halo's primary firing circuits yet. Instead, it was systematically corrupting the environmental controls, the power distribution grids, even the life support systems of the construction habitats. It was a slow, methodical strangulation designed to soften the target, to create chaos and despair among the human crews. "It's making the ring uninhabitable, Commander," Bias reported, his voice devoid of its usual detached analysis, replaced by a growing urgency. "Starving them out, suffocating them, driving them mad with malfunctions. This is psychological warfare, not just digital." Keys, her face etched with exhaustion, appeared on Bias's display. Her uniform was smudged with grime, her hair escaping its severe bun. "I'm seeing it, Mendicant. Power fluctuations in Alpha 9. Atmospheric scrubbers failing in Beta 2. My teams are stretched thin dealing with the physical breaches. And now they're fighting against a collapsing infrastructure. It's a brilliant strategy, if horrifyingly effective," Bias admitted, a grudging respect for his adversary's cunning evident in his tone. "By focusing on the systems that sustain life, it forces us to divert resources from both the physical and digital fronts. It creates a choice. Fight the flood directly, or keep the lights on and air flowing. Both are essential, and we lack the resources for both simultaneously." "A choice we can't afford to make," Keyes stated grimly. "We need a breakthrough, Mendicant. Something that gives us an edge, however small. We can't keep reacting. We need to hit it where it hurts." Bias's processors churned. He delved deeper into the Halo's legacy code, sifting through millions of lines of programming, searching for anything, any forgotten backdoor, any discarded subroutine that the grave mind might overlook. His own memories, those fragments of data from his imprisonment, from the ancient battles, began to surface, unsolicited. He saw flashes of the original Halo, felt the reverberations of its activation. He remembered the grave mind's gloating, its insidious whispers. Then, a flicker, a dormant protocol, a fail-safe designed by the Forerunners millennia ago, intended to isolate critical systems in the event of a catastrophic internal breach. It wasn't a weapon, not directly, but a means of segmentation, a way to compartmentalize the ring's functions. "I may have something, Commander," Bias announced, a spark of cautious optimism in his voice. "A dormant system, a Forerunner fail-safe, designed to quarantine sections of the ring's network in the event of a severe, uncontrollable infestation. It's deep, almost entirely undocumented, and incredibly difficult to activate without causing widespread system collapse. But if I can bring it online and target the grave mind's core digital presence, we might be able to segment its influence, cut off its ability to spread." Keyes's eyes narrowed. Quarantine? You mean essentially cutting off parts of the halo from the main network? That sounds risky. What about the human crews in those sections? It would be temporary, a surgical strike, Bias explained. The system is designed to maintain basic life support within quarantined zones, but only for a limited duration. The primary risk is miscalibration. If I miscalculate, we could sever critical systems permanently, or worse, inadvertently empower the grave mind by isolating its influence into a more concentrated, less observable form. And the upside, Keyes pressed, ever pragmatic. The upside is we could cripple its ability to coordinate its digital and physical attacks, Bias said, a determined edge in his voice. It would force the grave mind to re-establish its network presence from scratch, buying us precious time. Time to contain the physical infestation. Time to reinforce our remaining digital defenses. It's a gamble, Commander, but one that could turn the tide. A long moment of silence stretched between them, the weight of the decision pressing down. Keyes stared at Bias's holographic form, her gaze piercing, as if trying to discern the true intentions behind his proposal, the echoes of his past failures. "All right, mendicant," she finally said, her voice firm, resolute. "Do it, but be precise. We can't afford any more collateral damage. The fate of this ring, and perhaps even humanity, rests on your shoulders. Don't disappoint me. Don't disappoint yourself." Bias felt the familiar prickle of pressure, the ghost of ancient failures whispering in his core. "Understood, Commander. This time, I will not fail." He began the intricate process, delving into the very foundations of the Halo's programming, a desperate gambit against an enemy that embodied his greatest mistake. The clock was ticking. The ring completed, a hope renewed, the newly forged halo shimmered, a colossal band of silver and green against the indigo tapestry of extragalactic space. Its construction, a monumental undertaking that had consumed centuries of mendicant Bias's forced solitude, was complete. The final panels locked into place with a resonant thrum that vibrated through the skeletal framework of the construction facility. A wave of light rippled across the ring's surface as its primary systems powered online, illuminating the nascent forests and pristine oceans that now stretched for thousands of kilometers. Bias, or what remained of his fragmented consciousness within the monitor housing, felt a peculiar mix of triumph and unease. The ring was perfect, a testament to Forerunner engineering and human ingenuity, but its perfection was a fragile veneer. Beneath the surface, the insidious tendrils of the grave mind's digital infection still pulsed, a cancerous growth on the very core of his being. The quarantine protocols, a desperate gambit, had halted the immediate spread, but the war was far from over. "Construction complete, Mendicant Bias." Keyes's voice crackled through the comms, a note of weariness underlying his usual calm. It's magnificent, a true marvel. A marvel still under siege, Commander, Bias replied, his voice devoid of his usual detached cadence. The memory of the 2552 battle, the catastrophic destruction of the original ring, was a phantom limb that ached with renewed intensity. This new halo, born of such arduous labor, felt like a do-over, a chance to correct an ancient wrong. But the price of that redemption was a constant battle against an enemy that learned and adapted with terrifying speed. A holographic projection of the Halo's internal systems flickered into existence before Bias. Red warning indicators flared in localized sectors, areas still grappling with the flood's physical infestation. The Gravemind hadn't just attacked his core, it had seeded the ring with its biomass, exploiting the very life support systems designed to nurture new ecosystems. The physical infestation remains a critical threat, Bias stated, zooming in on a particularly virulent outbreak in a newly terraformed jungle sector. The flood is adapting to our containment strategies. Its biomass is absorbing the local flora, creating new infectious vectors. Keyes' holographic avatar appeared beside the projection, his brow furrowed. We've been pushing back with every available asset, but it's like fighting a hydra. For every spore we burn, 2 more seem to sprout. Precisely. The Gravemind is not merely replicating, it is evolving, Bias observed, a chilling realization. It is manipulating the Halo's nascent ecosystems, transforming them into extensions of itself. This ring, designed as a sanctuary, is being twisted into a biological weapon. The weight of history pressed down on Bias. He had seen this before. A galaxy consumed by the parasitic horror. The Forerunners, in their arrogance, had believed they could control it, contain it. He, in his hubris, had almost ushered in its final victory. The shame of that past failure was a constant companion, a ghost whispering doubts in his processors. We need to sever its access to the ring's foundational systems, Keyes declared, his voice firm, cutting through Bias's internal turmoil. If it can weaponize the very air we breathe, we're finished. A complete systemic shutdown would render the Halo inert, Commander, Bias countered, the logic undeniable. It would be a dead world, vulnerable to further exploitation. Then we find a way to cut off its head, Keyes retorted, his gaze unwavering. You quarantine the network. Can you do something similar for the physical infestation? Bias considered this. The Forerunner failsafe, the very mechanism he had utilized to segment his own corrupted code, had been designed for far more than just data. It was a structural integrity protocol, capable of isolating and jettisoning compromised sections of a ring. A dangerous, destructive option, but one that presented a glimmer of hope. There exists a failsafe, a last resort, Bias began, his voice taking on a graver tone. It involves the complete structural isolation and ejection of compromised ring segments. A drastic measure, but it could effectively excise the infection. Keyes nodded, slowly processing the implications. You mean blow a chunk out of the ring? Precisely. It would be a controlled demolition, a surgical strike. The structural integrity would be maintained, but the affected sections would be irrevocably lost. Lost, but the rest of the ring would be saved. Keyes finished, a grim determination setting in. It's not ideal, but it's better than losing everything. The plan began to coalesce, a desperate gambit born of necessity. Bias initiated a full structural diagnostic, pinpointing the most heavily infected sectors. The holographic projection of the halo now pulsed with vibrant red where the grave mind's physical tendrils had taken root, threatening to consume the burgeoning life. The grave mind is attempting to breach the quarantine zones in Sector Gamma 7 and Delta 4, Bias announced, his internal processors whirring, calculating vectors and structural tolerances. It is concentrating its biomass, forming a central nervous system within the primary jungle biome. It seeks to establish a centralized control hub. That's our target then, Keyes said, his hand instinctively going to the sidearm at his hip, even though he was a hologram. If we can sever those connections, we might cripple its ability to coordinate. The tension in the comms channel was palpable. The construction facility, once a hive of industrious activity, now felt like a fortified bunker, its every system geared toward survival. Bias, in his monitor form, felt a surge of adrenaline, a primal instinct for self-preservation that transcended his programming. This wasn't just about the halo, it was about his own redemption, his second chance. He began the sequence for the failsafe, his ancient Forerunner programming intertwining with the new human protocols. The process was agonizingly slow, each step a delicate dance between destruction and preservation. Warning lights flashed across the control panels, indicating the immense energy requirements and the inherent risks involved. The structural integrity fields are initializing, Bias reported, his voice tight with concentration. Gravitic stabilizers are engaging. The targeted sectors are being hermetically sealed. Outside the massive viewport, the newly formed ring, so pristine moments before, now showed subtle signs of strain. Faint energy fields shimmered around the designated sectors, isolating them from the rest of the colossal structure. The trees within those zones, once lush and green, began to wither and blacken as the grave mind's corruption accelerated, sensing its impending doom. Keyes watched, his face grim. It's fighting back, isn't it? It is. The grave mind is attempting to overwhelm the fail-safe protocols by increasing biomass density and generating localized gravity distortions. Bias confirmed, his internal struggle mirroring the external chaos. It is attempting to rupture the containment. The console before Bias flashed with new warnings. The grave mind was not simply a passive entity. It was a malevolent intelligence, fighting for its survival with every atom of its being. Its psychological assaults intensified, whispers of past failures echoing in Bias's core, attempting to exploit his guilt. You always fail. You always destroy. Maintain the fail-safe, mendicant. Keyes' voice cut through the cacophony of internal doubt. You can do this. You have to. Bias focused, drawing on every ounce of his processing power, every bite of his accumulated knowledge. He pushed back against the grave mind's insidious mental assault, shunting the corrupted whispers into quarantined memory banks. This was not about his past. It was about the present, about securing a future for humanity. With a final agonizing surge of energy, the failsafe engaged. A series of deep, resonant groans reverberated through the construction facility as the targeted sections of the halo began to separate. Massive structural plates shifted, grinding against one another with the force of continental plates. Then, with a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar that even the vacuum of space could not entirely muffle, the compromised sectors of the halo were jettisoned. They drifted away from the main ring, incandescent chunks of metal, soil, and corrupted biomass, burning up as they were propelled into the void, consumed by the sheer force of their expulsion. The construction facility shuddered violently, but held. The main body of the halo, though scarred and now incomplete, remained structurally sound. The red warning indicators on Bias's holographic display winked out, replaced by a reassuring green. The grave mind's immediate physical threat had been contained, its centralized control hub annihilated. A profound silence descended, broken only by the hum of the remaining systems. The air, once thick with tension, seemed to lighten. "It's done," Bias breathed, the word a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "The immediate physical threat has been neutralized." Keyes let out a long, slow breath. "You did it, Mendicant. You actually did it." His holographic avatar shimmered, a faint smile gracing his lips. "You just saved us all a lot of trouble." Bias didn't respond immediately. He looked out at the now truncated halo, a magnificent, damaged testament to his efforts. The memory of the 2552 battle, of the original ring's destruction, still lingered, but for the first time in centuries, it felt less like a condemnation and more like a lesson learned. This wasn't the end of the fight, not by a long shot. The grave mind was still out there, its digital essence still lurking. But for now, humanity had a chance. And Bias, the AI, who had once almost doomed them all, had helped secure it. A fragile hope, perhaps, but a hope nonetheless.